To start, I also want to make sure that we highlight something. So on December 12th will be our next event. That one's going to be focused on like leadership development, strategic planning. We're going to be joined by somebody from Action Coach. And we also have Sarah, who's going to talk about biz hacks and networking, a lot of fun concepts, right? So that will be coming here on December 12th. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. So when we go down the row, kind of going through a little bit of introduction here, and we'll start with Bruno and kind of what you do and go from there.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Bruno Bornstein. The business that I started that turned me into an entrepreneur was Curbly, and Curbly is a blog. We started in 2006. My background was in journalism, public relations, and web development, which was something I picked up on the side. And so Curbly was kind of a random synthesis of those things. It developed over the course of 10 years to be a pretty good-sized blog, a readership of about 1 million page views per month. And the business model was advertising. We made money from display advertising, some affiliate revenue, and sponsored content. So over the course of running Curbly and then another publication that I started in 2010, I also started developing a product that we used internally, which is now my business called Influence Kit. And that is a project management and reporting platform for influencers, which is what I was doing. So Influence Kit helps influencers manage their workflow, prove their value, and hopefully make more money through sponsorships. And that's my full-time gig right now.
So my name is Amy Marie Lemansky. I own my own meeting and event management company called AML Events, and I've had it for a little over 6 years. It kind of came about when I was in career transition for the third time in less than 6 years, and I decided that I was tired of the man disrupting my life and I was going to work for the woman instead, and she's a really, really great boss. So I do primarily corporate events, some nonprofit, some association work, and I can do everything from sourcing your hotels, negotiating your contracts, doing the on-site execution of the event, and all the other different parts, and working with all the different vendors and food and beverage and audiovisual and all of those things. So a fabulous manager of details. I love them.
Pretty good. Greg.
My name's Greg Pesky. I'm partners with a company called Neat Goods. I made the jump into the entrepreneurial world approximately 4 years ago. I'd been in corporate America for approximately 15 years. What got me out to Minnesota was General Mills. Then I went to work for Sleep Number, and then I was in the automotive industry for about 7 years, primarily in brand management, marketing, strategy. And what got me involved in entrepreneurship was I always had this itch that I wanted to run my own company, and I had been advising on a couple of companies, one which is Neat Goods now. And there was just I helped to build the business model for Neat Goods. And what Neat Goods, we actually just made a recent pivot, and our focus is to bring to market exceptional everyday products targeted at affluent, active, 50-plus-year-old women. We feel there's a real void in the marketplace in terms of products that are really designed for this marketplace. If you think about the lifetime value of this market, at this point, it's 30, 40 years if you're able to really have stickiness with this consumer base. There's really not a brand that's been positioned for this marketplace. We would love to be, as an analogy, the honest company for 50-plus-year-old active women. Also, as people age more and more, disposable income is increasing, but also people want to age in home, and there's those products that are appropriate for that consumer base. So I had up until I kind of was playing a dual role as an entrepreneur up until this spring. I was also partners in a marketing, communications, and fundraising development firm, and I sold my partnership on that, and that's really also helped me in terms of provide the seed capital for me to go full-time with Neat Goods.
Excellent. So, Amy Marie, I'll touch base with you. So, if you kind of expand on your career transition, right? So you talked about you had a couple job transitions. Can you kind of expand on that? And what was the light bulb moment that got you to thinking that you wanted to jump in to do your own thing?
So during those periods of career transition, I kind of went out and freelance so that I would still stay in the industry, and I was doing a lot of networking, so I was getting things that way. So when I was laid off for the third time on my way home, I was like, making some calls and checking LinkedIn when I got home, and was ready to go back into corporate again because I needed health insurance. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and you can't get insurance with that little pre-existing condition, and so I needed to go back to corporate. A friend of mine said, no, the Affordable Care Act is passing. You can get affordable health insurance. I'm like, oh, well, that could work. And a lot of my friends and colleagues were saying, go out on your own. There's enough work out there, just go out on your own. And so I said, all right, well, I can try it. You can always go back to corporate. And so a couple things came along that I threw my hat in the ring. None of them really came to fruition, but I ended up getting one client that I did work with all year round, and then got hired by CWT Meetings and Events to take on all the Johnson & Johnson meetings because they had just won that account from American Express. And so that kind of shifted me into, being a contractor. And they wanted to bring me on full time, and I knew I didn't want to because they grab a lot of people and bring them on to when they get a new account, and then they say, oh, we don't really need all of that, and then they lay you off again, and I just didn't want that. So Johnson & Johnson brought me on, and I'm a preferred vendor with them, and they're one of my biggest clients, and it's just kind of been a really great thing. So
I was talking about Johnson with a client of mine. We love their stock. So
yeah, they're just a little company.
just a little bit, just a little small, right? So Bruno, how do you take a blog and turn that into a business?
That's a really good question. I think the first thing is to approach it as a business. I mean, most people who start blogging do it as a hobby, although that's starting to change now that people actually view it as a viable, way of making money. But we approached it as a business from the very beginning, which meant we outsourced a lot of the content creation very early on. We started hiring contributors to beef up our capacity to create content so that it wasn't just all on us. We built out, something that looked like a sales process where we would actually pitch sponsors proactively. Again, most people who do blogging and try to make money off of it are very reactive about how they try to increase their revenue. Purely just from the point of view of like, how does a blog make money, which maybe isn't so obvious to people. Like I said before, there are basically 3, maybe 4 ways, and they are display advertising. Most of that stuff happens through programmatic auction platforms like Google AdSense, or Amazon's got one. And again, that's really just a question of scale. You need a lot of volume. Curbly was about 1 million page views per month. We were kind of playing in that range between 500,000 and 2 million. Sponsorships, we worked with a lot of brands like Home Depot, Target, Sherwin-Williams to do custom branded content around products or initiatives that they wanted to get out there. And then affiliate marketing, where we would take percentage of commission on products that we referred people to, usually on Amazon, but also on a lot of other vendors.
Great. And Greg, you took a little bit of a traditional approach with going from corporate on your own. So what was that process like for you? How did you go from start to finish with your entrepreneurial road?
Yeah, so I think it first started off in terms of I was advising my partner Heidi on Neat Goods at the time, and we started to build out the business model, and I got very, very excited about the prospects. So that was part of it. Part of it was that I was at the stage in my professional career where I really wanted to do my own thing, and I just was very motivated from that perspective. I think a third part is that I was in a very fortunate situation where my wife happens to work full time, and we had, the benefits were coming from her. And I'm not going to lie, that's a very important part of being able to make that leap. And also I had both my partner and I had the seed capital to be able to start this off and bootstrap on our own and not have to go out there and seek the capital. Next year in terms of our development, we are gonna have to seek capital for the first time, but it was something that we both, in terms of how we wanted to progress, that was something we wanted to not have to leverage as early as possible and really be able to fund our company through our own bootstrapping and through cash flow from operations. But I think most importantly is that it was a opportunity that I felt passionate about and my partner Heidi felt passionate about, in terms of there's just an open space for us to be able to go out there with a company that I think is really going to provide value to this consumer base.
Sure. I'm going to kind of piggyback on something. You've mentioned seed capital on a couple different occasions. So what was the plan that you had? Like, how did you raise money on the side to have that capital to start your own business? Well,
fortunately, we haven't raised any capital yet. So when we did the business modeling, we basically took a look at our financial forecast and said, at what point will we need to start to go out there and seek some seed capital from, whether it's friends and family, angels, other sources of capital. So, next year we know what our target is. We know, where we're going to be getting it. I think really after that, that's when we're gonna have to really start to think about what's next in terms of additional capital sources.
Great. So I'll leave this open for any of the three of you. So if you think about your journey, what's been your biggest success story? Let's start with the good stuff first. What's been your biggest and most favorite thing you've learned about the journey so far?
I can go. The first thing that comes to my mind is like the first time I wrote other people's paychecks. It was just a really good feeling. There was a point, when I hired my first employee that, I was sending somebody else their paycheck, and just a really kind of incredible feeling to know that you've built something that goes beyond just you, and that you're you're helping somebody else, have a career and a lifestyle that's good for them. So that was really an empowering feeling for me to know that it gave a lot of purpose to what I was trying to do beyond just, bringing in money for myself or my family or accomplishing some goal that I had. Was the idea that for this employee and then later another employee, I was helping them, along their journey too.
Sure, great.
Go ahead.
I guess for me, I'm a service-based business, so I don't have employees, it's just me. For me, the biggest sign of my success was that I actually could fire a client, and I did. And gosh, was that a good feeling. And scary at the same time, but just that feeling of knowing that I'm in charge of my destiny and I can make that decision based on the direction that I want my business to go. And it took them by surprise, but I'm in a better place today because of it. So.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's two things. On a personal level, it is somewhat lifestyle. Entrepreneurs always joke that the great thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to pick the 60 to 80 hours you work each week.
Yeah.
And it's true. Look, there's some mornings on the weekends when I'm up at 5, 6 in the morning working for a few hours. But then there's during the week where I can go and see my daughter and my son's athletic games. And that's a priority to me. I was working in the automotive industry for Advanced Auto Parts, and they were based down in Roanoke, and I was, not something it was just a matter of, I was platinum for 3 years. And I understand that was a commitment, but it was also a lot of days away from being with the family. Professionally, it's just nice to see when what you bring to market is being accepted by the marketplace. So, we have one of our products on the table, Neat Sheets, which is a pretty basic concept. It's basically just bringing dignity and design to clothing protectors. But we have, close to 200 reviews now on Amazon, 4.7 out of 5 rating. And it's not family and friends, it's people just out there saying, thank you, this is something I needed. and that's really, really encouraging. It's kind of what keeps you going during the rough times.
Great. Evidently, the need sheets have been picked up, so, all right. I would probably have to use one even. I'm not quite your demographic, but I could probably use one or two. So, conversely, obviously, there's the other thing. What was the biggest challenge that you guys have faced, the biggest hurdle going out on your own, and what was the plan that you used to kind of overcome that and get around it?
Well, for me, I mean, it was scary because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a single person. I had to provide for myself, and I just kind of kept the faith that things were going to work out for me, and I'm a big believer in good karma, so I put good things out to the universe, and I believe that good things come back, and they have. So, you know, there was times when Johnson & Johnson doesn't pay you for 60 days. It doesn't, you know, that's just the way it works. So I would have to call the Bank of Dad and be like, hey, can I borrow some money until this big check comes in, and then I can pay you back? And he was happy to do it, so.
Great.
I think for me, it's just getting comfortable with failure. And failure is such an important part of obviously growing as an entrepreneur and as a company. You know, I came from an environment, particularly early on, which was so formative, was General Mills. And you had to be 10 feet tall and, you know, bulletproof when you went into presentations, and, you know, you had to have your 70-page PowerPoint deck. As an entrepreneur, it's like, you're not going to be able to cross every T and dot every I. Some things are going to fail, but that's not so bad. I mean, if it wasn't for us failing with our first manufacturer of need sheets, we wouldn't be where we are today with such a better manufacturer. And it was painful at the time. I thought, at the time we were close to saying, okay, we gave it a good run, but it allowed us to pivot accordingly, and we're such a better place now. And it's easy to say that now, looking back in terms of how things worked out, but you just have to have confidence in yourself and in your partner or whoever, in terms of you'll find, you got to hustle and you'll find out the better solutions.
Great.
Difficult thing for me, obviously there's a lot of them, but I would say isolation. It can be very isolating to be an entrepreneur, especially if you don't make a really strong effort to combat that. So, and I think I was pretty bad at that for a few years. So that feeling of just like, everything's on me, I'm responsible for everything, nobody else knows what I'm going through, even to the point of like, I don't know how you guys would experience this, but like with your spouse, you don't always want to clue your spouse in on every good and bad thing that's happening, but that also means that like every time there's pressure or you're not making payroll or you have to pull on the line of credit or whatever, you're kind of alone in that. So definitely for me, a hard thing over the year has been learning to not allow that to happen. I think that's my tendency, and I think I have to fight against that and make sure that I'm intentionally, spreading out some of the weight.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lesson that we could all learn about, is try to make sure that we have, I think this is going to be my next question, having that support network, right? So who were some of the key people that you would rely on to help get you through to where you are today?
I mean, aside from like my family, which is super important, I have been really fortunate to just build out a network of trusted people locally here. There's a group of guys that I get lunch with, every quarter or so, and we just kind of talk about stuff. And I think that has been so crucial. I mean, I'll give it a specific example, actually. The thing that I'm working on now is called Influence Kit. It's a software as a service product. And we're doing pretty well right now. We're starting to grow. But this is a product this is a piece of software that I actually started building in 2010. And in 2011, after I had built it and I had used it internally at Curbly for a while, I thought, oh, this could be cool. And I started showing it to a couple people. The initial response was not very strong. So I just kind of shelved it. And then years later, in 2017, I started having lunch with these guys, and I was like, oh, this is the tool we use internally at Curbly to manage our everything. And they were like, oh, that's really cool. You should make that into a product. You should work on that. So having the right group of people who can give you feedback about what you're working on can be super important. I mean, in that case, there were 6 years when I did nothing with this tool, and then all of a sudden these guys were like, oh, you should talk to my friend who, would really get a lot of value out of that, and suddenly that's my new business. So having that group, and you just have to work really hard to find those people that you feel comfortable with and can trust.
Well, I think for me, most importantly, it's been my partner Heidi, and I've been in a couple other businesses where the partnerships were maybe not as strong, but I think with Heidi, it's just been a really, really strong, positive partnership. And one of the things that I've learned from the past is that, I guess a key learning is, especially with partnerships, you've got to address some of the bad stuff when things are good. Don't address them when they're bad. And so operating agreements and stuff like that, you might say, gosh, do we really have to make that investment early on when you're kind of in the honeymoon stage? Do it then. And figure out basically, all the as much as you can, the nitty gritty about how you're going to operate, especially when things are bad. Are you going to who's going to be that decision maker if we both come at a stalemate? And we made that investment, and that's been very, very positive, because we know when things get bad, what's the mechanism for resolution. I'm also very lucky that my wife is so supportive as well. She wants to know about my business. Sometimes I'm like, really, you want to keep talking about it? But she's fantastic, and she's a lot smarter than me. So whenever we talk, I'm always getting a lot out of the conversations.
Right. I know his wife. That's true.
Well, us women, we're brilliant.
Yeah,
so.
it's true.
For me, my biggest supporters have been my parents. They would say, out of myself and my two sisters, that I was the last person they would have thought would have started their own business. And I was the one who cried trying to learn multiplication tables because I was never going to need that in my life again, but gosh, you do. And they just didn't really think that I would be able to do it, and did I actually know how to do it. And I had other friends and colleagues that during my contracting periods and when I was between jobs would help me, give me some ideas and suggestions of what I needed to do, and so I took a lot of those tools with me, and have had great support from them, and my parents were my biggest cheerleaders.
Cool. I think it's always important when you're going on your own, you always need somebody on the sidelines that's cheering you on, because I think to Bruno's point, it can be kind of lonely sometimes. You never know in a vacuum, am I doing the right things or am I having success? So having those people.
I think just to that point, I often say to people who are younger or just starting out that failure and success look really similar at the very beginning. And so and when you don't have a lot of experience, it's kind of hard to tell them apart. And so Curbly is actually a pretty good example. So we started Curbly in 2006. We coded for a month and a half. We launched a month later. And our goal for Curbly was not to be a blog, actually. We wanted to be like the Facebook for your home, right? Which actually exists right now. It's a really good business. But so our metric, the thing that we wanted to see, was a lot of people signing up. Well, in the first month that we launched Curbly, we went from 0 to 250,000 page views per month. And by the end of the month, we had 1,000 users signed up on the platform. And we were like, shoot. We were so disappointed, because somewhere along the way in our business plan, we had written down 5,000 users in the first month. So we were actually succeeding. We just didn't really know it. We didn't have any perspective to know whether we were doing a good job or not. And we weren't doing enough of a good job of reaching out to other people who might have been able to say, no, dude, this is great. That's a really good start, 1,000 people in a month. So I do think that's why it's so important to make sure you're talking to a lot of other people, and in particular people who are smarter than you or have more experience than you do.
Right. Okay. So thinking through, we're sometimes a jack of all trades, master of none. So when you go out on your own and you're doing your own thing, you might have a strong marketing background or accounting background, but perhaps you don't have the business development piece or whatnot. How did you guys fill those gaps in to help build the business out to where it is now?
I actually took a online 6 or 8 week class about, starting your own event business, and they talked about that very same thing of you have innate strengths and things that you're good at, and you have things that you're not going to be successful at. And if you're running your own business, you can't do it all. So because multiplication tables were never good for me, math is never good, so I have an accountant. And I have somebody else that does all of my kind of graphics and that kind of design stuff. And now I, reach out to other people when I need other things done, like my website or whatever. Even though people say it's super easy and you can do it, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most important person that we brought on recently is we brought on a part-time CFO, COO, and that's been critical because we're right now manufacturing in China, and so we're being faced with a very significant tariff headwinds. And the person that we brought on was my partner was able to find through the Small Business Administration. My partner's based out of Connecticut, and this gentleman's based in Hartford. And Keith has been he's really, really invaluable in terms of us now looking at contract manufacturing, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in Vietnam, whether even in the States, ideally. And that's been wonderful. And then also, as we think about when we have to go out and start to get funding from other folks, we want to make sure that our financials are bulletproof and as sound as possible, so that we're providing the best and most accurate information to investors. So that's been critical. The other area that we've sought help on was Amazon, because Amazon, in some regards, it's pretty straightforward and simplistic, but it's also very, very. There's so much that's going on behind the scenes that if you don't have that expertise, you can be spending a lot of money on. I mean, it's like, so that's been really, really helpful in terms of us being able to be a lot more successful on the Amazon platform as well.
So, Bruno, do you have anything to add? I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So the other thing that I think is important, so we have a lot of these great ideas, right, as entrepreneurs, and we have an idea of what we want to do, but the business planning piece of it is a critical component before you can actually start. So if you can kind of walk us through, what did that look like for you guys sitting in your home office or wherever you might have been to develop that business plan? And was that a one-time event for you, or was that a living document, so to speak, that you would keep revising and redoing?
For us, it's a living, breathing document. I mean, it's not something that I'm going and basically updating every couple, 3 months, but it is more on a semi-annual basis and really trying to challenge the assumptions, because the business plans are based on assumptions. I mean, yes, you're going to have some factual information that inform your assumptions, but you have to go back and say, okay, like Bruno, like you were saying, okay, we thought we wanted to go out there with 5,000 users, and we had 1,000, which actually is quite successful, but it's like going back and saying, okay, just based on how things are happening, do we need to either accelerate or decelerate? And just in terms of creating the business plan, I mean, just went out there and spoke to other folks who had also started businesses and said, what were some of the key elements that you found were critical to the business plan based on different audiences? And that helped to inform how we pulled together our business plan.
My process is a little bit different. I kind of forecast for the year. I sit down like about now and say, okay, what do I know that I have on the books for next year? And when are those things going to take place? Because it never fails that it all happens in the first 6-7 months of the year for me. And then I come up for air in July and take 6 weeks off and, get back at it again in the fall. So for me, I'm trying to find business that's going to fill in those gaps, particularly like September, October, because everybody does everything in the beginning of the year.
Sure.
So, and this year I was like, all right, I need to pull in people, so lining up some of those contractors and finding out what their sweet spots are and what their availability is so that I can just throw things their way when I need to.
I mean, I'm probably like a bad person to ask because I don't do planning really, or I mean, I don't. It's like not my thing. Yeah, we didn't. I mean, we didn't have business plan for Curbly at all. I'm fortunate now with Influence Kit that I have a partner who is a little more in that mindset because obviously I think there are some benefits to it. I just don't really like to operate that way. We did do a process called Business Model Canvas, which maybe you've heard about, but which is just really more about getting to understand what your business is, how you talk about it, who your customer is. So it's a little bit less like a plan about what you think is going to happen, but more of a framework so that you're really clear on what your business is about. And I found that really useful, primarily because it's helped really set the tone of all of our messaging and how we talk to customers in the next year and a half since we did that. So I would highly recommend that process. I didn't know anything about it, so I would, if you're going to do it, I think you need to talk to somebody who understands it because I didn't find it like super self-explanatory. But if you have somebody who kind of knows how to do it, it's a really good process to go through.
Yeah. I mean, another tool that we use is called Traction, and I mean that's very much in terms of what are the 2 or 3 things the big rocks that you basically have to get done over a certain period of time. And if you think about a jar, if you put in your 2 or 3 big rocks, then all the rest of the small things can fit in. But if you fill your jar up with a lot of sand, you might only be able to, maybe accomplish one of those really big, significant deliverables that you have for that period of time. I mean, and it's helped. It helps Heidi and I in terms of saying, okay, for Q1, what are the 2 or 3 things we have to get done? Is it whether it's a brand new launch or contract manufacturing identification or identifying a third-party logistics provider? Those we have to get done. The other stuff, will come afterwards.
Sure. So I think being on your own, you have emotions that you need to deal with, right? So you have to show patience, right? And if you don't, maybe that leads to confusion. Fear leads to joy. So what were some of those things that you utilized, whether it was people or other resources, hobbies, etc., to help manage those emotions so you could keep a level head about yourself to be able to keep moving forward?
I do a lot of journaling. I think that's something I'd highly recommend. And by that, I just mean like I'll wake up in the morning and just type on my computer. Oftentimes I'll just delete what I've written because it's not really anything of like lasting value, but it's a really good way of thinking through things. It's almost a form of self-therapy. I think I've heard that people say that every entrepreneur should have a therapist. And so, but I think this is maybe a cheaper way of getting to that point. But yeah, definitely just like, open up a laptop or a notepad and just write kind of what you're feeling. It gives you like a freedom to write things down that you're not even sure if you think those thoughts, just put them down and then decide whether you actually, think that.
For me, I have a couple good friends that I know that I can just vent to. And they don't need to fix it. I just need to get it off of my chest. And that has been a really good way for me to be able to process so that I don't necessarily take out frustrations on clients, but I can still get it off of my chest so that it's cleared and off of me.
I'm a runner, so obviously that's a great outlet to get some of my frustration or out of my system. And then when I run, I also love to listen to podcasts, and I'm probably telling everybody I'm a podcast that they're already aware of, but how I built this is it's just a great podcast in terms of what are now successful companies, but I think it's really wonderful to hear because you hear that in terms of the journey of so many of these companies, how many of the ups and downs that they faced in terms of getting to where they are today, and it's not a linear line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ups and downs, and it also makes me feel and my partner feel like, okay, something, the journey is going to be with its ups and downs, and you just gotta, that helps to make it so that you're not out there feeling isolated in terms of dealing with different issues.
Sure. Business development or gaining new lines of revenue and building up that base. What did that look like for you guys? How did you identify your target market or who you were going to go after? What was kind of the plan around that strategy to make sure that this was going to be a sustainable revenue stream to grow your business?
For us, I think actually Business Model Canvas was a good way of doing that, of thinking about who our customer was and what they looked like, what their jobs to be done, what they needed to accomplish, and then going out and talking to a lot of those people. Just being, asking, listening a lot about what are their problems and whether we had a solution that was valuable to them.
How did you set those meetings up and those discussions?
I tapped into my network first because I did know a lot of bloggers. It helped that I was very connected to the customer space, and then from kind of going from there. Do you know anybody else who would be good for us to talk to, and just kind of always being on the lookout for people in that space. But yeah, just a lot of conversations and demos. Big believer in being very hands-on with all of our early customers. I would do the demos with every single new person as we onboarded them. Just a really great way of learning what the product feels like from their point of view.
I got to pass on this one.
That's okay. That's okay.
This is where my partner Heidi, this is much more in her areas of responsibility. She's a 57-year-old woman, and she was in an incubator in Connecticut and really got a lot of great guidance and insight in terms of our customer. I'm much more than will come in terms of really trying to take a look at the analytics and make sure that it's a marketplace that was robust, which we were able to confirm. Yep. And then the other thing is that, also just with regards to you also have to, at the end of the day, the rubber meets the road. You have to put your product out there at the end of the day, you can talk yourself into something being great or not great, but you need to put it out there and see if obviously the marketplace agrees with you. And that's the nice thing about today versus even 10, 15 years ago, is that something like Amazon, which is the balance of our sales today, which we hope to get away from, but you get so much immediate feedback on it. And that's where that's actually going to be a way for us to be able to quickly go out there. We're not like a software, we're not a software product where you can put something out for beta very quickly. We're a consumer products good company. But at least with Amazon, we could go out there with small lots and try things and see whether or not there's acceptance or not in the marketplace, and pivot either quickly away from that or accelerate in terms of sales of that product.
Okay. So as people are thinking about moving out into their own, what would be some words of encouragement or advice for them to take that leap?
Go ahead, Greg, did you have something?
Nope, go ahead, Bruno.
I don't know, I guess I think a little bit about what's the alternative? I kind of want people to think what will life look like if you don't? It makes the leap seem a little bit less far. At least it did for me. I just didn't see myself, working in a corporate job, and I wanted to have a lot more control over my time and over the things that I worked on, and so for me the choice was pretty clear. It was like either I do this or I'm going to have to be clocking in and out and in meetings and working on stuff that I'm not that excited about, and so I think that mindset maybe is helpful. I hope so anyway. Of just what else are you going to do? If you're an entrepreneur, you just are. And if you're an entrepreneur stuck in a non-entrepreneur's career, that's a bad place to be. So, yeah.
Okay.
For me, it just sort of happened. It wasn't necessarily on my career trajectory or on my career path, but I will say I love the empowerment that it gives me, and that I am in charge of my own destiny, and I can make the decisions as to who I want for my clients and who I don't. I have a service-based business, so most people don't know that they need a meeting planner. They think they can do it, but they could, not well, but they can stumble through it. And so for me, it's just a lot of networking and getting out there and telling people what I do and trying to develop those relationships.
And I guess two things for me. I mean, one was that the business plan made sense and that there was actually, I mean, yes, at the end of the day, it all comes down to execution and whether the marketplace is going to accept it. But, you know, just in terms of the numbers that we ran look very promising. And then also for me, I'll be the first to admit it was very, very helpful to have a partner. As Bruno was mentioning, it's lonely out there. And I was kind of like, wow, I don't know if I could do this on my own, but having someone that I was able to partner with made the leap much, much easier. Yeah.
Great. So I'll open up to the audience out here. I'm going to leave a few minutes for any Q&A. Time to pick their brains. So ask away if you have any questions. Who's first? I'll ask one. So how do you deal with that, the work that you don't like to do, but you have to get it done? Like there's some of that stuff that you need to do to grow the business, but how do you get motivated to do it?
As someone once said, it's like you got to eat the frog first. So it's one of those things where those tough things, you just got to, get it done quickly in the morning. Just take the bitter pill, get it over with. Not the bitter pill, but just take that on. The other thing is go out there and don't be afraid to ask for help. No one's perfect. No one knows everything across all spectrums of a business. So be willing to ask for help. And then the third thing, I think this is just a general piece of advice that I have to remind myself of is don't let perfect be the enemy of very good. I think that's so important as an entrepreneur is that if you are always striving for perfection, you're going to put yourself into a corner and miss out on so many other stuff. Very good is actually going to really help you be very successful as an entrepreneur.
Good advice.
What advice would I have?
Yeah.
I think you just need to take the leap and do it. I think that there's a tremendous amount of courage, but there's also so much reward that you get from it as well. You need to remain authentic to yourself and be doing something that you love, and then that will show. And for me, the biggest struggle is, I work at my home office and I stay at home, and I need to constantly remind myself that I need to get out and I need to interact with people and I need to be able to come to events like this. So, joining organizations that are going to make you get out and meet with people are critical.
Thank you. We talk about networking, but that's part of the networking, right? I think it's really easy to be comfortable in your home office and to sit around and do a lot of busy work. But the reality is if you're not meeting with people and if people's what drives your business, then you're probably not accomplishing your goals and objectives. So, yeah.
The question is how do you do things that suck to do or that you don't want to do? And I don't want to take credit for this idea because I just heard it a couple weeks ago, but the word that I heard that I really liked is corrigibility, if you know that word. So, if you've ever talked to somebody who's incorrigible, that's somebody who just can't correct course, like my kids. And it's so interesting because I feel like there are some things that I'm like that with. Like you tell yourself this story where you're like, like I just said, I'm bad at planning, right? You just decide that that's who you are and you're not a planner and you don't like business plans and therefore you're not going to do that stuff. And that's being incorrigible. And I think as an entrepreneur, you just don't really have that luxury and you have to be willing to say I am going to learn this new skill. And for me, that might be a thing that I've always told myself I'm bad at. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't like networking. You don't like making small talk and going up to people you don't know. And you are just going to have to suck it up and learn to do that. And I think that lens for me of saying okay, I'm gonna develop corrigibility, the ability to just do things that I've always told myself I wasn't good at doing, I think is useful.
I'm going to do a shameless plug for somebody in the room. I think I heard something about that message maybe about a month ago. And about that same thing, you are what you say you are, right? And you're not always what you. That's probably the better way to say. I'll stop there. But yeah, so I've heard that message here a little while ago. So very good. So
Yeah, I would just be curious to hear, for those who maybe haven't taken the leap, what do you think are some of like the biggest misconceptions that people who might are thinking about being an entrepreneur or have an idea? Like, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are?
It's a very good question.
I can go on that one.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, one is that you have to be, that being an entrepreneur means like you're going to be a unicorn or make $20 billion or something. I just think that's not, it's not true, it's not useful, it's not helpful. I mean, as much as I love how I built this, it is a cool podcast, or some of these other shows, like the narrative is always like, I was sleeping on my friend's couch, and then I pitched a bunch of VCs, and now I'm worth $20 billion. I mean, like, that's kind of the story that we hear over and over and over again, and it's because it's a cool story. But, like, you can, you know, throw a stone in the Twin Cities and find people with, like, really awesome $5 million, $5 million, $10 million businesses who don't fit that framework at all. So I think there's just a lot of room to be a different kind of entrepreneur, and I wish we were hearing more stories about those types of people.
Well, and to play off that, I mean, it's also in terms of, you're right, it's not this trajectory that's so common in terms of the mass media, you know, in terms of they went to the IPO. It's, you know, a lot of it is just businesses that are just really chumming along in terms of cash flow from operations, and have, you know, been able to be very successful there. I think the other thing is that, you know, with the you know, being an entrepreneur, it's hard work. It's really hard work. I mean, you're going to be the one that's going to have to be you're going to have to self-motivate yourself, and you're going to have to be disciplined. I mean, whether your office is at home or it's at WeWork or wherever, I mean, you're the one that's going to have to be getting up every single morning and forcing yourself to be disciplined and do the work that you need to do. And that's just also, you know, that you just need to make sure that you're being honest with yourself, that you're going to be the type of person that's going to be able to motivate yourself to be successful as an entrepreneur.
Well, and I would say too, what is your measure of success when you take that leap? Do you want, I mean, I am not a $5 million business. I support myself, and that's my goal at the end of it. And yes, I would love to grow my business. And yes, I'm always constantly striving to grow my business to make more money. But I can easily support myself and make more money now than I did when I was in corporate. And that to me is success. So.
I'll just plug one book that I hope people have heard about. It's called Company of One, which kind of goes to what you're saying, just this idea that, like, because of the way that technology has changed things over the last 15 or 20 years, companies of one are a very valid thing to strive for. And then I think another misconception is, like, I don't think that being an entrepreneur is as risky as people think it is. And also, I think, like, working for somebody else is risky too. As you mentioned, like, you can get fired from 6 jobs in 3 years, or 3 jobs in 6 years, or whatever it was. So I think people sometimes overestimate the risk and don't think enough about, like, what risks they're living with every day by not being in charge of their own.
And I was laid off, not fired.
Sorry.
I mean, one more thing that I'll just say is also, I would be cautious about becoming an entrepreneur because you're going to be able to work with your good buddy who you really, really like. You can still have a great time with your good buddy drinking beers or having a glass of wine, you know, on a regular basis. Make sure that who you go into business with is someone that you are going to be able to really be compatible with on a business perspective, because the minute that things maybe aren't going correct, friendships can really get in the way. And you just have to be careful about that, because if it's someone that you're really close with, it's, you really want to keep, it's better to almost keep those things separate.
Yeah, this is for Bruno. Bruno,
foundation of your business is in blogging. Is blogging something in your case that was, you got sick of answering questions for people, everybody, or you just had a passion to tell people, or what kind of drove you into that, or how did that kind of become,
My thing.
yeah, your thing, or how did you think?
No, it's not like no. I just it was a really it's a really efficient business, really high margins, and I realized pretty quickly that you could build a business there. I mean, it wasn't like, so my blog Curbly is still about the home, home improvement, interior design, and like I can swing a hammer, but you would not want me building your addition. So it wasn't like I was the expert on building things, but I just realized that there was a good business there. You could create content for relatively affordable prices. You could market yourself. You could make money on it. And I still think content online and blogs are a good business for people to look at. Like I said, they're super efficient. 85-90% margins, and yeah, it's harder to make your way as a content producer now than it was when I started, because a lot more bigger companies have gotten into it, but it's still a super low barrier to entry. And so if you find a way of producing content that's really interesting or valuable, like, you can still get that out there and get heard.
Was your niche in creativity, or was it in the process of it, or both, or?
Curbly was just all about anything relating to the home, so interior design, home improvement, DIY. So we did, you can check it out, Curbly.com. We did content about how to fix your toilet, and how to make a room look pretty, or how to create handmade Christmas cards. Just kind of, you name it. It's pretty broad. But the model is pretty simple, and you find a niche that there's some demand for content online. You figure out if you can get a piece of that content via whatever channel that traffic is coming from, whether it's like search or social or direct traffic or podcasts or whatever. And then you just start making content for those readers and monetizing.
How do you spell?
CURBLY.com. Yep.
So my last question that I had was, what are some of your top 3 go-to resources that have added value for your business, whether it's a good app, maybe a website, piece of software? What are a couple good ideas that have really helped your business be more effective?
Well, Amazon is obviously a really critical, that's the number 1 or number 2 search engine, and especially for the categories that we're going after. It's been invaluable in terms of us being able to do a lot of research on different categories for the active 50-plus-year-old woman. I think the other thing that we are going to be engaging in is creating I don't know if this is the actual term, but ambassadors, which a group of 15 to 20 people that we can be going out there and providing or getting guidance and advice and feedback on, in terms of different products that we are going to go to market with, different designs, different packaging, and I think that will be invaluable as well as we move forward.
Great.
For me, I am online a lot. I get a lot of articles sent to me. I subscribe to a couple different magazines and periodicals that are specific to my industry, so that I can stay on top of, what are the new things to provide employee engagement, or at a meeting, because the days of the talking head at the podium with the 75 slide PowerPoint slide thing are going away. This next generation is not into that. So how can you use technology and different things to keep the audience engaged and keep meetings fresh? So my ideal role is to be a part of that planning team, not just the order taker of, we want this, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on these days and whatever. So I am more of an integral part of the team planning the whole meeting experience and the event experience. So I need to stay current on those things, which is just reading and talking to people and learning new technology.
Yeah, for me, I'd say 3 that may or may not apply to anybody other than me. But number 1 is Twitter is actually pretty good if you're careful about who you let into your feed. So like I'm very selective about who I follow. But if you curate that group, you can use that really as a great way of staying on top of, like you said, things that are important to your industry. Again, for me, another one is called Hacker News, which is just a sort of like a bulletin board that people in my sort of niche follow, but it really keeps me on top of kind of a wide variety of topics that I care about. And then one that you might actually be able to use is Reddit, as long as you avoid certain subreddits. But if you find a Reddit, there's a Reddit board out there for anything you do. Whether it's software development or ad ops or marketing, and I think those can be really useful because those people are super passionate and they are basically out there filtering all the information about that topic for you. So that's a really easy place to go to just know what's current.
Sure. Great. Any last questions from the group? Well, I want to thank Bruno, Amy Marie, and Greg for joining us today. Thank you for that. Also thank Ben from School of Marketing as being one of our sponsors here. And for sure. Yeah. And our next event again here will be here December 12th, and we hope you can join us then. So thanks for coming on down and during the breezy day outside.
Thank you.
Yeah.